Art is therapeutic. That's the title of this live, and that is what I want to talk about. So, I am an art therapist and an artist, and sometimes the expectation and talking about how much art is therapeutic is taken for granted and assumed, and well, of course, because it's so fun, and maybe art's relaxing, or maybe art kind of can be helpful, but a lot of people might not really understand what it is about art therapy in particular that makes it therapeutic, that helps people to improve their mental health, and what it is about embracing art and creativity yourself independently can do to improve your mental health yourself, to develop confidence, to develop resilience, to feel calmer, to work through and express some challenges, be able to express your emotions, as well as being able to communicate things in a way that you might not otherwise be able to. So when talking about art therapy, when as a core message, the key with art therapy is to highlight that art and creativity and the different aspects of art therapy, working with a therapist, is a really somewhat non-judgmental, non-threatening approach to therapy, where sometimes people might feel overwhelmed by the idea of talking about their emotions, or not sure where to start when it comes to explaining what's going on. Sometimes people might be able to talk about their experiences, whether it's a traumatic experience in the past or whether they're going through a stressful time in the moment. They may be able to talk about it from a cognitive perspective, from their thinking point of view. They may be able to be very logical about it, but then they might be pushing away their emotions, and they may not necessarily be allowing their emotions to be felt, allowing themselves to sit with those feelings. And that's what is so important. And sometimes people would feel so overwhelmed and so stressed and so dysregulated, maybe like really agitated and up here, and maybe feeling lots of big emotions that sometimes, like when, we end up labelling these emotions for people on their behalf, that can be helpful in some ways, but in other ways less helpful. Hello, hi Sandra. In other ways less helpful, because somehow we've constructed these words that represent emotions, yet actually our internal experience might not feel that it matches that emotion or matches that the way that it's perceived. So there's all sorts of variations in how somebody might experience something. So that's where actually using an image, using paint or using pastels or using whatever materials can be used then to physically create something that expresses emotion. So as I'm moving my hands up here, this could be about splattering paint or physically making marks with a graphite stick or with a pen or with a charcoal, and leaning into what's been portrayed, what's been expressed. And something to highlight here is that there's so much theory, there's so much literature behind art therapy, behind art psychotherapy, interchangeable, that actually when we're talking, I'm speaking from my point of view rather than from other art therapists' points of view, but when we talk about art therapy, it's a bit of a mixture of that sort of theory and that theoretical understanding, that there's so many different ideas that you can bring into it. and that lived experience, that me as an artist knowing what it feels like to create something that feels important and therapeutic and safe to do so, that feels enjoyable, or sometimes not so enjoyable. Sometimes making art can feel stressful because there's so many different pressures that we place on ourselves, but somehow holds that space for us. And I've witnessed and been privileged to witness so many people, adults and children, families working together in different ways, so many people leaning into making art when they haven't known how to talk about their feelings. And actually sometimes these emotions can feel really heavy, and sometimes they can feel really trapped within our bodies, you know, like this idea of, you know, mental health being stuck in the body, like feeling a heaviness on your chest, or if you've heard bad news, something, you can often feel it like viscerally, like that kind of real tension in your body. And expressing that in the art materials almost like lets it float away. And that's not dismissing the intensity of an emotion, or saying any sort of fakery around this, because there isn't necessarily a magic wand that we make a piece of art and then suddenly all of our problems have disappeared. However, what it does is it plants that seed, and it gives an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for transformation. Making an image that might change colours as you develop it is an example of that, because you might see an image that starts off, I suppose, like one shade of colour, maybe like blues and greens, and then it evolves into reds and oranges, and then it maybe comes back to doing something that might then be different. So there's so many different things with that, and that's what I wanted to just highlight tonight. So in terms of the February challenge, February, I set a prompt to different prompts every day. So like I've shared them on here. The first 3 prompts, so yesterday was about photography, taking photographs, expressing, like capturing something maybe that might be quite ordinary, and taking a photograph in such a way that it seems interesting, that it's seen from a different angle, or close up, for instance. Now here, just in front of me, I've got a notebook that I'm writing in, my journal, and I've got a sketchbook. So if I was to take a picture, quite ordinary, actually, this is a lovely book. Yeah, quite a special book, but quite ordinary. And so if I was to take a picture of like the ring binder bit, and maybe part of the background and part of how that book's together, and go close up, that could then make for something interesting. I might then draw that, combine that with maybe open up the book and take a picture sort of inside. Maybe draw the handle of a mug, for instance. We've got this kind of the handle, or look down onto the mug and take a picture of that. So very boring things or ordinary things. Sometimes it's the ordinary that becomes interesting. And this is what in the art world was happening in certain kind of styles, like Cubism, for instance. We'd have an image like a cup or like a bottle or something, and then drawing it from different angles, so it would look unusual, it would look interesting. And that's the difference between like seeing your problems or seeing your stresses and your big emotions just from one angle, from just one perspective. If you're making something creative and modelling that, and miss you too, Kaylee, modelling that idea of seeing the world from a different angle, then actually your brain gets this message that actually some things could be different. Maybe my life isn't as boring as I think, or maybe there's something special that can come from this. Maybe there's a possibility, maybe I can work through some of those big emotions that I'm going through. So that's the idea of really yesterday's prompt, that's about photography. And I know a lot of people that say to me, well, I'm not very creative, but I do like to take photographs. So it's a good shout for that. And if you're drawn more towards photography, or drawn more towards poetry or written word or dance or whatever it is, then lean into the prompts in that way as well. So today's prompt was all about making art about yourself, something that represents you. And there's so much flexibility with that. It could be drawing objects, it could be drawing, hi Mark, it could be drawing images of yourself, it could be maybe symbols, I suppose, lots of different things. That could be it could be your name. You write your name and then maybe put a thing around it that shows things about yourself. But there's an option really for you to do something, whether it's just for 5-minute little doodle or drawing, or whether it's something bigger. And yeah, that's about all really. So it's trying to make these lives regular. I'm aiming for a live every single day in February, and it's great to see people popping along while I'm live. And if you've got any questions and things, let me know. That would be really cool. What I'm noticing already, when having done a live yesterday, having done another one today, is that actually it feels interesting to kind of just look at what's going on for me, whether I'm self-conscious about how I'm talking, whether I'm conscious about what I'm saying, or I haven't got a plan of what I was going to be saying today. So it now feels a bit like there's lots and lots of things that I could touch upon. For instance, more things about art therapy, and more things about different approaches to using art for improving your mental health. And actually, I think that's okay, really, to leave it like that, because we can go all day, really, otherwise. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. And take care. Bye-bye.